If you want to live off-grid, then there's some things that you should be aware of before you get too far carried away in your dreams about living off-grid. So what does it mean to be off-grid? Well, it means that you don't need, want, or have the conveniences of city water, sewer, power, gas, etc. To be off-grid means you are somewhat sustainable out on your own with no utility providers. Usually these homes are powered by generators or solar power panels. The heat source is wood stoves or mini splits. Mini splits, it would be if your generator is powerful enough to run that. Many off-grid properties have a well for water, but some don't. In the case that there is no well, then the water could be trucked in and held in a holding tank, or there may be a rainwater collection system on the property. If rainwater is being collected, then there's going to be holding tanks kind of around the property to be used for your water source. Off-grid properties are also not connected to city sewer. They may have a septic tank or they might not. Some off-grid properties use composting toilets, or they simply have an outhouse. What about laundry? If you have a well and septic system, then you are pretty good to go. You're in good shape to have a washer and dryer. But the question then becomes, do you have enough power to run them? What I've seen most frequently is the RV style washer and dryers that are small and don't use as much energy. Thanks for watching. I make a new video on life and real estate in Southwest Washington every week. Make sure that you subscribe and turn the bell on for notifications. Also, if you're ready to start looking at houses, check out my home search website, which is searchhomesvancouverwa.com. I will put a link down below to my home search website in the description. Also, just feel free to call me. I'm very easy to get a hold of, and my phone number is here on the screen. So I've already described what it means to live off-grid, and now we're going to dive into a few more frequently asked questions. So where are these properties? Most of these properties are pretty far out of town. I usually see these listings up in Cougar, which is like the Mount St. Helens area, or out in the sticks of Washougal, or even past Washougal out into Stevenson, Carson, etc. Amboy and Yacolt would also be on my radar as potential locations for off-grid living. Basically anything enough away from the city or county utilities and in a rural setting is a good candidate for off-grid properties. So I've already described what it means to live off-grid, and now we're going to dive into a few more frequently asked questions, such as 1, where are these off-grid properties? 2, what about barn dominiums? And 3, can you get a traditional loan on a property like this? The cost to construct a barn dominium is significantly less than a stick-built house. As such, you can buy a barn dominium to live in for much less than typically buying a normal house on property. For a lot of people, this gets them to their goal of living on some property for a much lower cost. Let's get into good stuff and talk about financing. The bummer about buying off-grid homes or barn dominiums is that lenders don't treat them as a typical financing scenario for a conventional loan. They call the properties non-conforming, which means that the house doesn't meet Freddie Mac or Fannie Mae guidelines. And as you know, many lenders selling loans that are then packaged up and then sold to Freddie Mac or Fannie Mae. So that is why a few months after closing, you usually get a letter letting you know that your loan has been sold and is now being serviced by a different lender. For mortgage brokers to sell loans to the big guys, the loans have to fit a very specific set of criteria. Basics being having power, water, sewer, septic, etc. So unfortunately, barn dominiums and off-grid properties just don't fit very neatly into that criteria for conventional loans. Now, if you are working with a lender who keeps their loans in-house, like they're not selling off those portfolio loans, then that would be different. So reach out to me to have a conversation about that directly, because those banks really have more discretion about who they're lending money to for what purposes. So they're not having to meet all of those guidelines as they are writing those loans. Typically, when a conventional loan just won't do to buy that barn dominium or off-grid property, the solution is to use a land loan or an alternative loan product. To keep this short and sweet and to just get straight to the bottom line, you need to be prepared to put 20 to 30% of the purchase price down to get a loan for one of those properties. So these lenders can usually only loan 70 to 80% of the value of the property. So lenders see the properties as being higher risk. They want you to have more skin in the game. If your lender thinks you have a shot at using a conventional loan to buy a property that's off-grid, they're going to ask you a billion questions. You may want to use a conventional loan for a couple of reasons, mostly because you want to save on that down payment. Even if you're able to put 20 to 30% down, not everybody wants to do that. Just be prepared for lots of questions. Here's just a couple of examples. obviously, what's the source of water? If the water is being stored in a holding tank, where are they? If they are outdoors, what's the source of water in the winter when they freeze? Are they buried? What is the source of power? If it is solar panels, is there enough sun to provide power all year? When does the seller usually have to turn the generator on during the months that we don't get enough sun? So there's just a couple of examples of questions that might come up. The other big thing is that the lender is going to need to have a good appraisal. And so if you're looking at an off-grid property or a barn dominium, it's going to be really important that we are also identifying comparable properties that have sold in the last 6 months that are similar. So because the lender is going to need to have an appraisal done on that property, and these properties are harder to appraise because there's just not as many comparables available to pull from. So just keep that in mind as well, that we might get through all of this and at the finish line, it's very, very, very hard to appraise that property because there's just nothing else similar within a couple of miles from it that has sold within the last 6 months. If you are interested in buying an off-grid property or talking to a lender about using a land loan to buy that adorable barn dominium, call or text me and let's set up a time to talk. I'm happy to talk you through the process and to get you going with your home search.